Okay, welcome to our Bucky Weekend call. It's November 2nd or 3rd, depending on which continent you're on. There are three Musketeers tonight. We're excited. Richard, how are you feeling and what do you anticipate for today?
Well, I'm feeling very Maui sunny-like and warm. But I'm also feeling very good because I've been working for the last 2 or 3 months with two colleagues in writing a chapter for a book that's being published in New Zealand, I guess, and it has to do with the history I've had over the years in social work. And so we put the final touches to the chapter on the deadline, November 1st, and we've got the response back that it's been fully accepted, except maybe what the publisher needs to do in finding probably format and style kinds of corrections. But yeah, it's a real work in progress that I had with a former student and a former colleague that we worked in the front lines many years ago. So it's really fun working together as a team to write the chapter. And then I was involved with another project earlier this year I was recognized as one of 50 leaders in the country in my discipline. And so they're doing an oral history project. And at the end of the questionnaire, they said, do you have anything else you'd like to add? And so I didn't add it verbally, but I added it in a written way. I took a summary, the introduction and the conclusion of chapters and articles that I started writing in 1983, 1984, now right up to 2024. And all of them had it, were embedded with Fuller's thinking and Fuller's ideas of what can be done in this sort of social welfare system. And so it's really a neat a kind of tracking of that 40 years of trying to bring Fuller into my discipline. And so now I've actually summarized all those articles and made it available to the oral history people. But now I'm going to share it out to the other two authors so that they can see kind of the traveling journey that we've both had, or we've all had, over the last number of years. And the student, I started working with a student in the mid-90s, and then she went to India on a practicum, and we've stayed in touch over the years. So it's kind of fun to be working with a former student in writing, and she knows Fuller's work very well, and actually tried out some of the thinking in her work with indigenous farmers in Kerala and southern India. Yeah, so it's a good time to be here in Maui, and it's a good time to be able to share with you what we finished getting done on a November 1st deadline yesterday.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yep.
Congratulations.
So Nan, how are you feeling, and what is your expectations for today?
Mine is very, very grateful, and congratulations on being a top 50 in your country, in your discipline. That's amazing. And grateful for I can't imagine why people cannot see what we together are seeing. Yeah. So I mean, because we are looking at things around us and it's so real, and yet most people don't see. They see what they want to see, and they make decisions from there. And so often those decisions create a lot of issues for the world, right? And then the other thing is I have I the whole group here, the entire community, the ecosystem, the acceptance of the metaphysical part of the world, right? That one blows me away, okay? Because it's like everyone is talking. Yeah, we talk about the reality, we talk about the science. Science is like so big, it's like facts, and yet so open to the metaphysical side of the world, right? So I've not come across any other group, and that actually thinks of the world in this manner and humanity and so on. So for that, I'm forever grateful, because it has opened up so much, and it's allowed me to also you've given me the context, and also all the little details that allow me to actually try to shift people in my community. So and it's really fun to start hearing them say the things that we say in this group, right? You know, like they love the idea that the world is eternally regenerative, and then they started spouting cosmic integrity, and the other one is that, you know, nature has no pollution. I'm like, so cool. But saying it is one thing, having the team echoing it and really believing it, I'm just blown. Thank you for that. And Steve, thank you for sharing your drawings. Yeah, I mean your the visualization of what you see. Okay, and because you showed that, I was like 6 points. Then yeah, straight away, yeah, you're right. We've been talking about that 6 corners, right? Is it corner? The points, yeah. Yeah, so I could see so clearly, and then then tying it with the chakras, right? We talk about, I mean, all of us, at some point in our lives, we come across the chakras and all that, but to have it pulled together inside what we're talking about, the octahedron, and whether we are inside or outside, I'm like, yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, Steve, how do you feel, and what do you look at taking away today?
I can't resist sharing what you're talking about. So I'm gonna say there's the 6 points. And by the way, in the Native American tradition and the Kabbalah tradition, there are 7 directions: up, down, the 4 corners, east, west, north, south, and then the 7th direction is to the heart, which is really profound. That's the inside direction. So that's the 7 chakras right there, the 7 energies of the body. You mentioned it, and I thought I would just share that so then people could kind of see what you were sharing too. I'm really thrilled. I love the caliber of people on this call, and the way we think through things, and the way we share, and how much I'm expanding my awareness of what's going on. And I miss Joe when he's not here. I miss others. Manu used to be on the call regularly. He's now attending the Wednesday call. Maybe he'll drop in here, but it's especially if we go to daylight savings, we leave daylight savings time to go to regular time. It'll be a little bit for him. I think he comes in at 5 a.m. or something on this call, so that's kind of tough for him. So I'm real excited, honored to share, and honored to learn so much, and really honored, Richard. I don't want to, and both of you guys. I mean, you guys are outstanding in your fields, and I just am so appreciative of your insights. So I'm looking forward to more insights and to share. We're in the fuller explanation. We started last week. We went through triangles versus squares, and then we went through it with triangling versus squaring, and then we went through cubing versus tetrahedroning, and now we're going to go to visual literacy, and this is where we're starting to read today. I like taking turns reading. If someone wants to start, that'd be wonderful. Somebody want to start with visual literacy? I'll start. Visual literacy, because I'm ready to go. You know, I've been thinking about it. Visual literacy, Fuller's concern with fine-tuning communication, developing and using words that are consistent with scientific reality, is one facet of the role of language with respect to synergetics. Another deals with the difficulty of describing visual and structural patterns. Anyone who has tried to describe an object over the telephone is well aware of the problems involved. There seems to be a shortage of functional words. And Anne, you commented about my visualizations, and that's why I resorted to graphics, because it's to try and explain that tetrahedron spinning around that guy in the 7 directions, it would be very difficult without that graphic. So absolutely right. The temptation to use your hands is irresistible despite the futility. This scarcity of linguistic aids is especially severe in non-cubical structures, which characterize most of nature. Most of nature is characterized by non-cubical structures. That a language of pattern and structure is not widely accessible indicates that humanity's understanding of such phenomena is similarly underdeveloped. We thus joined forces with Fuller in an investigation of this neglected field, and in doing so, we become more and more aware of the rich complexity and the order inherent in space. Along the way, we are introduced to some new terminology that includes the lesser known language of geometry, as well as some words invented by Fuller. More information, useful only, it is clear, if the terminology is both precise and consistent, leads to better comprehension, which in turn leads to the ability to experiment knowledgeably. Experiment fosters both greater understanding and, in short, and invention, in short, progress. Wow, that is so freaking powerful. I've got to put that in my book. There's a book called How Words Change Your Brain. And words do change the brain. And this goes and explains exactly why it's so important to be precise and consistent in our wording. The other thing that I noticed here was he mentioned she mentions fine-tuning communication, which has all sorts of hidden meaning in terms of Bucky Fuller vocabulary and lexicon. And those were the things I noticed here. Did anybody else notice anything in there they want to talk about? Okay. In conclusion, go ahead, Richard.
Well, I don't know if it's right there, but I was going to comment on this earlier, and I forget now where I read it just recently, but it talked about the physical eye and what it sees, and it talked about the mind's eye, and talking about it being able to see what the physical eye can't see. And so that connected me with this whole idea of the physical eye sees, something that's, say, concrete, and the mind's eye is the one that sees the connections in between those invisible relationships in human life. And so you have to have that combination of the physical eye and the mind's eye working together to see things that are seeable, but also to see things that are generally not seeable. So I thought that was a neat way to put together physical eye and mind's eye.
Yeah, this goes back to the energy centers in the body, and the idea that in the lower self, from the root chakra, the root energy center, I like to call them energy centers rather than chakras, because chakra sounds so new age, mystical, esoteric. So going in the lower energy centers, that's all physical. And when you go to the top, then you start using the third eye and this idea of being able to imagine and to visualize in the mind. So I really like your reference to physical eye versus mind's eye and how both are required in order to really see reality the way that it really is. I like that, Richard. Okay, anything else? In conclusion, Fuller's insistence on employing accurate vocabulary is part of an important aspect of human communication. We join him as prisoners in the science of spatial complexity, the terminology of which is for the most part unfamiliar. The systematic study of structural phenomena is an important and badly neglected aspect of the human experience. Okay, who wants to read Peaceful Coexistence then?
Okay, I'll take that on.
Okay.
Peaceful coexistence. There is a strong temptation to ignore synergetics on the grounds that we feel perfectly able to handle mathematical concepts that cannot be seen. Academic sophistication leaves us with a certain intellectual pride that makes Fuller's observations with their childlike, but the emperor isn't wearing any clothes ring to them, seem unimportant. Every child is boggled by infinity and surfaces of no thickness, but these are necessary concepts, natural extensions of philosophical what-ifs. The human mind is not bounded by the constraints of demonstrability. True enough.
Yeah, that's basically what Richard was saying. You have to have your physical eyes and you have to use your mind's eyes. Good, go ahead.
Yep, true enough. However, it is also possible to define a system of thought and exploration that is confined to the facts of experience. And moreover, such a system is able to reveal additional insights about physical and metaphysical phenomena that would not necessarily be discovered following the traditional route. Such is the case with Fuller's synergetics, as we shall see. His hands-on approach led to a number of impressive geometrical discoveries. Synergetics is a different kind of mathematical pursuit, not a replacement for calculus, but rather a complementary body of thought. Reading further, hold on now. Let me just take this call.
Okay.
Guardhouse, boleh kasih masuk ya? Yeah, boleh. Okay, thanks. Okay. Sorry. Okay, where are we now?
Synergetics.
Reading further, right? Reading further will not, okay. Synergetics is a different kind of mathematical pursuit, not a replacement for calculus, but rather a complementary body of thought. Reading further will not face you with an ultimate demand for a decision of fundamental allegiance, synergetics, or the mathematics you learned in school. Rather, you have the option of being additionally enriched by a fascinating exploration of structure and pattern that cannot help but change the way you see the visual environment. When Bucky reminisces, there is nothing in my life that equals the sense of ecstasy I have felt in discovering nature's beautiful agreement. He offers us an enticing invitation. He has taken an alternate route and it has not disappointed him. Shall I go on?
Yeah, if you'd like.
Okay. Operational mathematics cannot claim exclusive rights to the name of mathematics any more than other branches of mathematics can. It is simply a new approach stemming from the characteristically human drive to experiment. It claims instead is that exposure to these concepts fosters an understanding of nature's structuring and therefore provides an advantageous base of experience. In short, synergetics is an internally consistent system which has produced significant models with respect to certain physical phenomena and led directly to practical inventions with life support advantage, to use Fuller's terminology. It is likely that thus far, we have only skimmed the surface of the applications of synergetics. Very few people have been exposed to its principles, and so their full significance is yet untested.
Richard, do you feel like reading?
Yeah, I switched over to the computer in order to get the bigger image.
I'm going to try something here.
So that's yeah. So finally, Bucky's approach is compellingly playful, and we should read his material with the inclination to enjoy the adventure, sense of ecstasy. Why not? Fuller's unorthodox way of looking at mathematics and indeed universe can provide a way to circumvent some of our more rigidly held assumptions. Here's an invitation to start over with a temporary suspension of disbelief we can embrace a new understanding of the exquisitely designed scenario universe. One of the challenges of synergetics lies in opening rusty mental gates that block discovery, where we are asked to be explorers and comprehensive thinkers, job titles not usually assigned in our specialized world. The essence of synergetics is modelability. Anyone can play with those models, and likewise, claims Fuller, anyone can understand science once they get their hands on nature's coordinate system. Its accessibility and emphasis on experimental involvement makes Fuller's thinking extremely important. He offers us an approach to learning and thinking, an open-minded experimental curiosity, which itself is applicable to every discipline and aspect of life. No question is too simple or too complex to be asked. Fuller's first words in synergetics are "dare to be naive," reminding us that we have the option to see the world through new eyes.
Okay. Wow, that must be the end of that section.
Mm.
We're starting chapter 3.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
I think
continue.
you have something to say to that, you know. Sometimes not sometimes, very often, I get very frustrated, right? Frustrated because like people who, especially the one I struggle with the most are actually very scientific and mathematical people, right? So they expect people to see what has been done, but they're very close to seeing what else is being discovered, right? Because the basis of math and science is about discovery, you know. So the way these subjects are put forth is like this is it. That's it. You memorize, you learn, you need to copy what people are saying there, and but that's not what science and math is really all about. It's about observation, questioning, and discovery. So those were some of the things that it's not easy, you know, to get this through to math and science people, and because of that, you find that when like in our country, there is this real need for, I think in many ways, when this whole drive for STEM subjects came about, it started with I think the Western countries. If I'm not wrong, it could be America that started the whole STEM movement. Because we also have realized that a lot of the what do you call the like Americans and British and Australians and not Canadians are okay, but these countries, the people taking the science courses and like pursuing in the university, these faculties, these courses in the faculty has dropped tremendously. So a lot of Asians have taken up the spaces, because in Asia there is this drive that you have to be a strong for math and science, right? And then when that came out, it's more because there is a drop in the numbers, right? We saw that. However, the drive behind it has shifted so much away from the reality of math and science that the students all just moved away. They just don't like it at all, right? So it's like just now as we were reading that chapter, that last bit of the chapter, the one thing that came up very, very strongly for me is that to shift that space. Yeah. Because you know, it's another way of looking at it. And the point behind science and math is that there's so many ways of looking, and there's so many more discoveries to be made. And then depending on whether you zoom in, you zoom out, you see different things, and it's not absolute. That needs to get through. And the people hardest to change is the teacher training syllabus and the curriculum in itself. Okay, just some thoughts I just need to put out there. Okay,
Cool.
I'm done.
Wonderful. This idea, dare to be naive.
Mm.
In Buddhism, there's a thing called the beginner's mind. So every time one sits in a meditation, if you sit down thinking you know something, you just screwed yourself up. Every time you sit, you sit as a beginner. What am I going to learn today? And that's the way the universe reveals itself. If I go into a situation with a predetermined idea of what's going to happen, I cut off possibilities that are very obvious if I haven't got that prejudice, if I don't have that bias, you know.
Mm.
So anyway, that's kind of interesting to me. Any other thoughts or comments before we start on chapter 3?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because when I went to India in 1994, and I was interested in meeting a guru. And so my host family connected me with somebody, and we had several meetings over maybe a number of weeks. But he would be asking me questions that came across to me as if I should have the knowledge, I should be able to answer. And so I would try and answer. I'd try and look like I'm intelligent and wise. And then he would, in a sense, brush that aside and try and get me to start from that fresh place, that place you were just talking about.
Mm.
And I found myself realizing what he was trying to get me to do, but not being able to do it because he would ask another question and I would try and give the smart answer. And finally it sunk in terms of what he was getting me to do. I think was exactly what you were talking about, is to start at that beginning every time. And of course, in later years, when I became more familiar with Bohemian dialogue, well, and it's much the same thing. Don't go into the conversation or the discussion with a predetermined idea that you're going to outmaneuver or outpersuade the other person to accept your truth. Yeah, I like that. That's and dare to be naive is another way, I think, of being able to say, dare to try something and make mistakes along the way, which comes back to Anne and the philosophy of education, that it's dare to make a mistake and correct it, and not dare to get it wrong and get whacked on the knuckles for it. And so that actually beats the dareness or the naivety out of you. And then you try extra hard to be to have the perfect or absolute answer, or at least you try and have the answer that won't get you whacked on the knuckles.
You know, Richard, along those lines, I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast this last week, and they were kind of laughing and made a joke and said that logic is dangerous. In the age of dogma, when we've got all these predisposed, formatted means where logic takes you down a certain hole, it's dangerous to be logical. You know, you got to come back to common sense and have that, be a little bit naive and dare to be the beginner. So right. I actually wrote that down. I thought it was so hilarious that logic is dangerous in a culture filled with dialectic memes. Logic is dangerous, which I thought was really interesting.
Yep. And just to share something here, yesterday I had a very interesting discussion with one of my teachers, and yeah, she's also from a very science background, yeah, and very logical in her thinking. And I was actually at a wedding, one of my teacher's wedding, and she happens to be my ex-student, and the husband too was an ex-student, and I got to see so many of my ex-students there, so it was really cool. But what happened was, as we were talking, we were sharing with her. Some of our people joined us, especially from the legal profession, and joined to teach, because there were things that they had to do that it just didn't sit right with their conscience, right? Because many people go into law because they wanted justice, they wanted to help the people, but then when you're in the actual business of it, you end up doing, you like it or not, there'll be frequently you'll end up doing the things that you don't want to do, which sits against your principles and values, right? So I know one of my teachers, he's very vocal about it, but there are a few others who stepped out of it for those very reasons. Now, and then we were talking about the teaching profession. So I said, actually, most professions, the people who stepped away because there are things in their values, principles wise, they don't agree with. Like, say, my sister, for instance, she's my partner, with the school and the setup and everything. She's an engineer. I'm the language person. She's the engineer. And but she refused to go into the industry after getting her degree because there was things in the industry that she didn't agree to, practices. So she decided to go into teaching instead. Now, then we start talking about the teaching profession. And she says, yeah, actually teaching, I don't really see, she doesn't see that you have so many of these integrity or value kind of things that, like practices that that can go against your practices and your integrity and your principles. I told her, I said, there are plenty that doesn't sit well, right? The very fact that kids are punished and wrapped on the knuckle for making mistakes, kids who are made to feel afraid of the teacher, afraid to go to school, they pee in their pants because they're so afraid to ask for permission to go to the toilet. Yeah, tons. The examples are just horrendous, right? And if you really think about it, what actually is abuse, right? Okay, instilling fear in people to the point where they cannot function. Joe is coming in. Hi, Joe. Glad we can make it.
Sorry, everyone.
No problem. Yeah, we're just talking about missing you. Yeah. Okay. So so we went down this path, and for me, I saw a lot of it, and I'm like, wow, we have kids spending 11 years of their lives in fear, and there's nothing wrong with it, and we are okay to allow that to happen, So it was, and we don't think it's an integrity, value, or principle issue. I was like, wow, we come to a point where we actually are accepting the fact that it's okay for teachers to do that, So anyway, that for me, like I am very I really appreciate the parents. I really look up to the choices parents and some of the teachers have made. Some completely walked away from even pensions because they didn't agree. Okay, because they couldn't get through within the system, and they walked away. There were those who are like the parents themselves walked away from systems like this. Others like, okay, what can we do? And there was one talk I had with my incoming students in one of my schools, and one parent actually stood up for the teachers for not allowing kids to go to the toilet. And because that is a human rights issue, because it has to do with health. And thankfully, there were parents in the audience, because he spoke up, because I was sharing this, right? Kids are not allowed to go to the toilet, and therefore it becomes, it's not correct. They have to go to the toilet, right? Then this parent spoke up and said, oh, I think it's the teacher, it's the independent of the teachers. It's not like across the board. Thankfully, I had a parent in the audience who spoke up. And he said, no, actually in my children's school, it's at the principal level, right? And they had the sister withdrew their kid from another school because her daughters were getting UTI, and then at the same time you have others talking about the kids peeing in their pants but just too afraid to ask for permission to go. But it is a health issue, so things like this, and I don't understand how schools and teachers are allowed to get away with that alone. And it's like the teachers have the authority to treat kids like this. Oh my God, it doesn't sit well with me. And that's why I really appreciate the parents who actually will walk away, but many don't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they add on to it because the kids get into trouble in school for not doing stuff. They come home, and I know of some of my students getting locked in the toilets because the parents got so angry, and then punishment is to lock them in the toilets. Some took them over to the mother's house, which is the grandparent, dropped the kid there and refused to take the kid home as punishment. Oh my God, the kind of fear and what it leaves behind, that sense of abandonment, that fear. You don't know whether it will show up or not, and how it's going to show up. Wow.
That's absolutely right.
How do you even agree to that?
Well, amazing. Hey, Joe, we're glad you made it safely. How you feeling? How you feeling? You dropping?
I'm feeling great.
Yeah.
And it's great to see everybody. And apologies for being late. Just something ran a little bit later than it should have, and then I thought I didn't have any juice on my phone, so I couldn't log in. So I apologize for that.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's just great to see everybody, and I'm looking forward to just continuing on with the text. And
cool. We're about to start chapter 3.
Cool.
So if you want to go, and I think Richard, you were reading, weren't you? If you want to continue, you sure can. If we want to rotate, we can.
Yeah, I'll carry on for a bit more.
Okay.
It's getting into readings about synergy is really kind of exciting to revisit it and make sure that whatever I was thinking years ago is still relevant, let's say. Or maybe what I was thinking was incorrect in the first place. But anyway, systems and synergy. Fuller's mathematical explorations seem to fly out in many directions at once, but they share a common starting point in the concept of systems. Derived from the Greek for putting together, the word system means any group of interrelated elements involved in a collective entity. If that sounds vague, it's meant to. The theme is widely encompassing. Long ago, secluded in his room, experimenting with toothpicks or ping pong balls or whatever available material seemed like to reveal nature's secrets, Fuller began to see a persistent message of interdependence. He was later to discover the precisely descriptive word synergy, but even without that lexical advantage, a sense of interacting parts increasingly dominated his vision. More like the poets and the artists of his generation than the scientists, he was drawn into the relationships rather than the objects. By stating that Fuller looked at systems, we learn very little, especially in view of the world's current popularity. We have transportation systems and systems analysis, stereo systems, and even skincare systems, all conspiring to diminish the precision and usefulness of the word. But let us enter into the spirit of Bucky's half-century search and abandon our 20th century sophistication in order to rediscover the obvious en route to the surprising and complex. Much can be gained for alongside.
Sorry.
That's okay.
For alongside, there it is.
Much can be gained for alongside our era's growing consciousness of systems and interdependence is also its ever-increasing specialization. Individuals are encouraged to narrow their focus, precluding a comprehensive vision and inhibiting curiosity. how things worked questions, how things work questions are reserved for children. As adults, we are afraid to step outside our expertise. Furthermore, we're quite likely to have decided that we have no use for mathematics at all by the time we reach high school. Both factors, specialization and avoidance of mathematics, causes some aspects of Fuller synergetics to seem dense, while others seem oddly simple. However, the novelty of his approach serves to give us new insights. So bear with Bucky as he discovers the world by himself. His enthusiasm may be contagious. Yeah.
Well, comments, questions?
Well, this, for me, this is so reminiscent of how I was first introduced to systems at McGill University in the 60s. And we as students were told by our instructors that this systems theory stuff was the forefront of the future. And my recollection, it might have been selective, but was that the definition of systems at the time was exactly what Fuller had up front here. It was just a set of interacting parts. And that seemed to be sufficient for a while. And then out of my own curiosity, I started to ask questions about, well, so how many parts does it take to make a system? And I couldn't get an answer. And if I did get an answer, it would be sort of like, well, I don't know, probably at least 2 anyway. And that was about it. And that was a void for me for 10 years. And when I was first introduced to Fuller through one of the synergetics books, I can't remember whether it was in 1975 in the first one or 1979 in his Synergetics 2. But as soon as I saw that there was a chapter that was titled Systems, I went to it right away. And all of a sudden, I had a definitive answer from Fuller's writings. And it didn't matter to me whether he was right or wrong. It's the fact that he answered the question. And for him, it was very simple. He said, oh, you want to know that the answer to that question? How many parts does it take to make up a system? Minimum 4. And that was period. And that's when I really started to pay attention to Fuller and his idea of objects and relationships. And then a deeper understanding of synergetics as a way of bringing 2 or more people into a process to achieve something that neither one of them could achieve on their own. And so this is such a beautiful memory. And also the toothpick thing that Amy is talking about here, that's exactly what my introduction to Amy was in person at Fuller's 100th anniversary celebration in San Diego in 1995. I went to one of her workshops, or her workshop in that weekend. And that's what she had all of the adults in the room doing, was playing with gumballs and toothpicks and putting together structures. And it was very enlightening to see how many adults were embarrassed to behave like children in the beginning. And then once they got over that, how deeply sort of engaged they were in working with toothpicks and gumballs. And so that'll be a forever memory of my first meeting of Amy Edmondson in person. And she wouldn't have known me because I was just, one of 30 in a workshop.
Cool. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say really briefly. The thing that actually sticks out for me really quickly, and I guess and this relates to, in a way, I guess both Amy and Nan. This element of how adults are actually afraid to step outside of their comfort zone. So I mean, that speaks to the whole idea behind psychological safety. That if you have an element, and this is what Anne was saying before, this idea of punishment, where, for someone that is actually being wrong, that there is this, so the idea of putting something together, or how things work is reserved for children, so to speak. It's this idea of having to be right is the fundamental problem, because you have to be right. Because why? Because if you're hyper specialized, you're staying within a narrow niche, you're actually staying within a comfort zone, you're not testing boundaries, nor are you questioning anything either. So this is the fundamental idea about questioning how systems work to begin with. So what happens is, if you create a culture of fear, and fear and conformity, then that's what happens. Whereas you no longer have people thinking about how things either work, nor do you have people thinking about how things could work differently. And so that supports either current power structures, in a system, or if you're in a company, it could lead to its demise, because what happens is you have no longer any ideas that are being generated. Either way, you're supporting a hierarchical kind of perspective. So fundamentally, I think that really gets to one of Amy's course concepts. We're trying to move us away from having to always be right.
Cool.
Yeah.
George,
Actually,
go ahead.
sorry. Actually, Joe, I kind of hesitated towards the end there, as to the point I wanted to make, because I was going down the path of what makes a bully, and what makes what makes something become abusive. So because I just texted, I need to find, I need to go down this path a little bit more, and go down, how do you identify, if someone is being bullied, right? Or the what are the, it's not about a definition anymore, but when you go into psychology part, how do you identify a bully, right? So in the dictionary, very clearly it says, a person who habitually seeks to harm or intimidate those whom they perceive as vulnerable. Yeah. Another one, the verb is seek to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. So I'm going to go down a little bit more and dig a bit deeper on this, because that was the direction I wanted to go down, but I cannot just relate it straight away like this, because I could probably get vilified for that, for saying that. But for me, I find that you, as adults, when you're dealing with children, you cannot go down this path. Okay. Because there are other ways, and we've done it. So, there's no necessity to threaten, on a regular basis, to punish, and to make people fearful. So imagine 11 years of your life, you do things out of fear, and the discipline instills fear. I'm like, yeah. So that was what I kind of stopped short of saying just now, but now it's kind of separated from what I said earlier, so I think it should be good.
Cool. Joe, do you feel like reading? Are you okay to read, Joe, or would you rather skip?
Yeah, sure. Fuller was unafraid to appear naive. He announced his observations with equal fervor. For the simplest, only the triangle holds its shape, and the very complex, the surface angles of the planar rhombic tricontrahedron, sorry about that, correspond exactly with the central angles of the icosahedron, 15 great circles, but on every level with conscious of system, with every level he was conscious of systems. A system, was Bucky, is a conceivable entity dividing universe into two parts, the inside and the outside of the system. That's it, except, of course, for the part of universe doing with the dividing. He demands precision. A system is anything that has insideness and outsideness. Is this notion too simple to deserve our further attention? In fact, as is typical of Fuller experimental procedure, this is where the fun starts. We begin with a statement almost absurdly general and ask what must necessarily follow. At this point in Fuller's lectures, the mathematics sneaks in, but in his books, the subject is apt to make a less subtle entrance, half-page sentences sprinkled with polysyllabic words of his own invention, having discouraged many a reader. The math does not have to be intimidating. It's simply a more precise analysis of our definition of system. So far, a system a system must have an inside and an outside. That sounds easy. He means something we can point to, but it is trivial after all. But is that trivial after all? Let's look at the mathematical words. What are the basic elements?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading in the book.
No worries, no worries. What are the basic elements necessary for insideness and outsideness, i.e. the minimum requirements for existence?
Okay,
Assuming
let's pause right there for just a second, because Amy said something to me that was quite interesting, and then hasn't said it again, and she's repeated herself twice. Fuller, unafraid to appear naive, he announced his observation for equal for reverse simplest, only the triangle holds a shape in every complex in thereafter. But Harry says, a system, says Bucky, and Richard, I wonder if this is an update for you. A system, says Bucky, is a conceivable entity dividing universe into two parts, the inside and the outside of the system. And then then she says, that's it, except of course for the part of the universe doing the dividing. That blew me away. So, I mean, a system could be one entity that had an inside if everything else is outside. It could be two elements in the conceivable entity, it could be three, but it has an insideness and an outsideness, and this one blows my mind because she doesn't repeat it. That's it, of course, except of course for the part of the universe doing the dividing. Wow, that blows my mind. I'm thinking of a yin-yang symbol, with the black over here and the white over here and the line going down through the middle. And then I'm thinking of the white dot in the middle of the black shape and the black dot in the middle of the white shape. Any comments on that?
No, I think that this is actually and somebody I recently had a conversation with. Sometimes when you just look at numbers in and of themselves, there's two things here actually. So when you just look at numbers, and you don't look within the context of the numbers, then you pretty much lose the meaning of the numbers themselves. So that there is, when I was talking to somebody about analysis that you have, and this may be a better example. You have an individual that has a set of attributes or characteristics, and they exist in a system, right? So there's an inside and there's there's the internal and the external. So if you're looking at measuring something like health outcomes, then you would see what the individual's characteristics are and what environment are they actually in. And then you can kind of start to analyze the circumstances along with the individuals. So then you have the events that occur, and then you're able to measure change from there. So you have something that this entity, if you will, that has a set of events that they experience that leads to a certain change. But it's somebody that exists within an ecosystem. And that's an inside and outside, right? There's the internal, which are the characteristics and the attributes, and then there's the external. And that's important analysis to do, because if you just looked at numbers per se and looked at statistics, you'd be maybe ignoring the circumstances. You'd be just looking at a particular as to what happened, not look at the environment and the relationship between the environment and the entity itself. So I think it's a really important thing, because I often see that type of analysis and nuance in analysis is often lost. And what Fuller's saying is the second important thing. He requires fidelity with with numbers and precision in dividing. This is why he requires precision with words, because words shape our reality, but it's also precision with numbers. Because once you start to dig into the numbers themselves, they have to accurately align with the reality in order to have any kind of fidelity in the analysis itself. So that the concepts and the ideas actually match to reality. I think that this is actually profoundly important, because I think many times, even where, in a very practical sense, where I work, people will pump out statistical models, and they're often wrong in relative to the budgeting forecasts, or even predicting spending or whatever it may be. And they're wrong because they don't necessarily look at the context by which the money is actually being spent. Meaning they have no idea as to, they're just getting numbers and looking at historical numbers and reducing it to that, as opposed to actually looking at the environment and why and how it's being spent, and evaluating and asking those deeper questions. So ultimately, what this does is provides us a framework for actually digging in deeper and asking questions that are meaningful.
Well, what I would like to do is to get, all of us thoughts on this, because this has been of interest to me, is that he talks about the simplest, and then that a triangle holds its shape. Then he talks about a system having to have an inside and an outside. And so when you apply that, which is getting maybe into the more of the complex side, a triangle doesn't apply. It doesn't fit the definition, because a triangle does not have an inside and an outside. And so that's when he worked his way through, for me anyway, to the point of a triangle being able to be divided in a way that it folds up into a tetrahedron, which has an inside and an outside, and it's stable, and it is it has the boundary around it, and has its inside and its outside. And that's where he also then ends up saying that the minimum system that has an inside and an outside, and is, if you want, can stand on its own, is the tetrahedron with four corners, or 4 points, or four entities interconnected with each other 6 ways. And so he, from my understanding, argued that you can't have a system with anything less than 4 that meets the definition of having the boundary itself and the inside and outside to it. So I don't know. That's what I've taken out of Fuller over the years. I don't know how this reading that we just had in terms of the simplest to the complex has kind of registered with you or evolved with you in your understanding of systems, understanding the simple and the complex in the context of systems.
Cool. I'm still, yeah. I mean, you've worked with it for decades, so I'm just a beginner here, and what you say makes a lot of sense. I want to come. I just really think for some reason this line that she drops in here, where she says, except for the thing that divides them. See, as an entity, that's it. Except, of course, for the part of the universe doing the dividing.
For the
I've never
observer.
heard that before. I just never heard of that before. And as soon as I see that, then what comes up for me is, I'm just going to share my screen here for a couple little bits, is this idea of yin yang. And here's this line that seems to divide. And then I start thinking of a 3D. Let me see here. Where is this thing? I have a really great 3D graphic here. I hope I'm going to find it. Oh, shoot. I just had it up and I don't know what I did with it. Shoot. It was really exciting, but I've done a lot of, I don't know. When I looked at the chakras, I noticed that they had yin yang relationships. In other words, the crown energy center is exactly a dual, or yin yang has an yin yang relationship with the root energy center. The sacral has the same relationship with the visual. This is like the family, the tribe. This is like the child, star child thing. This is being able to make decisions. And this is being able to speak the truth. And what I noticed was my ability to make decisions depends on my ability to speak the truth, and my ability to come out of my tribe and become a citizen of the universe and go into my higher self. I need to use my vision, and it's a battle between what I see as possible and what my family says is true. There's this yin yang relationship there. And then here's the same thing with my root chakra coming from the earth and then having a relationship with heaven. So this yin yang thing, I've never considered what divides those things. That language just really blows me away. And there's another 3. I hope I can find this really quickly, because this graphic, oh, here it is right here. Watch this. This is like a 4D yin yang. Here we go. Let's see if it'll load in. Okay, good. We start out with a sphere. And this whole thing's going to take 2 minutes. So here's your sphere. Here's your torus. It starts spinning around itself. And then it looks like a dissected cube, 2 triangles. Now, all of a sudden, here comes the yin yang. There it is. If that would do it, and there's where the center comes down here. And then I got this off the internet. This blew me away. And then there's the white dot in the middle of the black. And so this is a 4D yin yang. And it's not done yet, folks. Wait till you see this, what comes next. Are you hip on this? Here is a 3D or a 4D yin yang. And it's going to start animating here in a second. Look at this. Wow, that blows my mind. And that's not done yet. Watch this. He starts to rotate it on different axes. Look at this. Holy freaking mackerel. The red ball goes through the black hole. The black ball goes through the red hole. And then it continues. I mean, honestly, this is freaking, this is a 4-dimensional yin. Oh my gosh. And then, of course, you see the lines there, drawing the line that separates the two things. What is that? What is it in the universe that separates the yin from the yang? What is that line of demarcation? And of course, I think it's probably the line of convex versus concave. Anyway, I just thought that was fun. And then I got before I saw this, I think if I'd seen this, my brain would have freaked out. Before I saw this, I went to my graphic guy and I said, hey, I see a special relationship. And isn't this intriguing, you guys? Wow, this is 4-dimensional. So it keeps going in and out of itself. Wow, boggles my freaking mind. All right, so here's, that's that one. And let me see, here's one that, and I think, here we go. No, I thought I had it up. I think the problem is every time I load up the engine that runs a graphic, it shuts the other one down. Okay, here we go. That was it. Okay, here we go, guys. I had this vision one night. Oh, that's only that's the PNG. But you guys get the black hole and the white hole, right? Here's the black hole, and in the center of it's white. Here's the white hole. The center of it is black. And so now here we go. Watch this. Is this going to be? Oh, it's not going to be it. I got to find the animation. This is animation right here. Oh, this is slide 1 of the animation. Here's slide 2. Oh my goodness, I hate it when I'm so. I got a new computer, and so I'm having to find things off my external drive, and I apologize. I'm going to ask you for indulgence for one more second because I have got to find that. I think it's at the very bottom. Yeah,
it's okay, Steve. You know, yeah, we're willing to wait. Don't worry about it.
Here we go. Watch that. Boom.
Oh.
So it starts out as a black hole and white hole, and then it comes together. And is the yin yang possibly telling us about the nature of the universe in terms of its white hole black holeness?
That would be something that, wow.
Yeah. Isn't that something? And I think it's very possible that Chinese people saw this. They knew the nature of the universe.
Yeah.
And showed that. And of course, all this is a torus. Isn't that right, you guys? You see the torus in it, right?
Yeah, can you put that in the chat?
Can I put that in the chat? I don't know. Let me try. It is, how big is it?
Probably not.
I don't know. I can try. I'll drop it, and if not, I can
mail it.
I can get it to you somehow. Edit. Change on the edit in Notepad. I don't know. I'll find it, and I'll see if I can do it as we proceed. Thank you guys for bearing with me as I.
That was actually really, really interesting. I mean, that was sometimes seeing it like that actually makes it just so much more accessible.
Wow. Thank you. But I keep worrying about this, except of course for the part of universe doing the dividing. This is blowing my mind. So I don't know. So okay, well, where do we go ahead?
Well, just stay there for a second, because this is interesting for me, because what I saw in the simplest, the idea that something holds its shape, the triangle,
right?
And that's 2-dimensional. I mean, if we draw it on a piece of paper, it's a 2-dimensional sort of figure. And if we actually made one and tried to stand it up on the table or on the floor, a triangle by itself will not stand freely.
Right.
So, and then when you have it in its 3-dimensional, if you want, form, it is freestanding, and it has meets the inside-outside as criteria as well. So I'm wondering that when I look at a in this case, the yin yang in a two-dimensional form, it doesn't meet the definition of a conceivable entity.
Right.
But when you see it the way you presented it, and it actually is in a more three-dimensional form, then it's a conceivable entity. And I think what she's getting at, and others get at, and maybe what Anne's getting at too, in terms of teaching, is that we teach the simple. We'll teach the diagram on the page, and then try and tell somebody that that's a three-dimensional something. But it isn't until you can actually put it in that three-dimensional form. And then it really does become a conceivable entity. The two-dimensional picture that we have to learn from, it seems, is not a conceivable entity, is what I'm getting out of this kind of reading. And that until you can get it into that other dimension, that modeling that Fuller's talking about, you don't recognize it. And it takes me back to this experience I had with a group of child welfare people, mixture of First Nations and non-First Nations, native and non-native at the time. And I had a three-dimensional tetrahedron, and I was trying to explain how it operates as a system. And you could see in the non-native eyes almost rolling, in the sense of they don't understand. And when we left for lunch, one of the child welfare workers, a native person, she walked beside me on the way to the lunchroom and whispered in my ear, and she said, "I get exactly what you were talking about. That's how we think." And so it brought home this idea that in classical sort of education, it seems that we've been taught to think linearly or two-dimensionally. And those who come from an ancient or even a more recent indigenous kind of background and history, they are taught to think holistically or in conceivable entities. And so it's hard to sort all this through when you read a paragraph or two paragraphs like Amy has in this part of the book, and grasp all of this understanding of the simple, in the sense that something holds its shape as opposed to something that doesn't. And then in the more complex, it's something that is a conceivable something that has inside outsideness and is freestanding. And so that's what I've been trying to work my way through over many years, to understand the integration, if you want, of simple and complex. Simplex and complex, let's put it that way. And so many times people will talk about simple and complicated. And as soon as the word complicated is used, it's a frightening term. It's a term that says, that's too big for me, that's too much for me, and they walk away from understanding it. And it possibly is another way of saying that's for somebody who is a specialist in whatever that subject matter is. They understand the complications, whereas I don't, and I have no intention of trying to understand. So leave it to the specialists to be more precise, if you want, or more expertise than whoever I am in a layman's context. And that really takes the general comprehensivist person well, it denies them that possibility of being sort of a general comprehensivist, which was what Bucky was so insistent on, that that you had to be a good generalist, which was very different than being a narrow specialist. And then once those two are understand, then you can put general and specialist together. You can put comprehensive and specialization together, and you get a yin yang of those two instead of, you know, the binary of one versus the other. And of course, Bucky was always playful in the sense of so who do you think runs the army in terms of their title, their rank? And when you think about it, you realize that, oh my God, it's the generalists, the generals that run the army, and they tell the specialists what to do or what not to do. And the specialist is beholden to the general. And that's what I think too is what makes the difference between a really good CEO of an organization is that they are generalists, and they hire a bunch of specialists, and that way they get to, in a sense, make the specialists do their bidding, make the specialists stay put, do their work, and stay in their lane. And that's another way of saying, we'll keep you segregated and separated, and therefore all of you aren't going to gang up on me, the CEO, and throw me out, type of thing. So
No,
you keep the specialists in their place.
well, you keep the specialists in their place, but the specialists actually do it willingly. You don't even have to do anything.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
The reality is that the people, you know, in that particular instance that you're articulating, is essentially where you have specialists become so vested in what they're doing and they keep it complicated. They have they're vested in not making change. So, I mean, you see that a lot of times, and that's where things become static. And things remain the same. And so the CEO kind of stays the CEO, and depends, you know, this is where obviously there's an ethical component, you know. Yeah, the generalists are telling the specialists to do, but do the generalists in that particular instance that you're articulating even want things to change? And so, I mean, if they do, then hopefully that they would require to have specialists become more, you know, more general, and more have a kind of a more holistic perspective on an organization, because then that would make the organization adaptable. But clearly, I mean, when we're talking about it in terms of, you know, if somebody doesn't necessarily have that, and they're just looking for their own, looking after their own particular interests, then they don't even care what the generals or the specialists do, because the specialists will keep things complicated until this organization falls apart. They don't even have to do anything. But a general that is actually telling a specialist what to do, that has the best of intentions, would ultimately be incentivized to have specialists become more general so that they can actually adapt to the changing environment. So the idea of an organization that is adaptable and resilient would encourage a specialist to become more generalized, which is often why, you know, more forward-thinking organizations actually have those types of opportunities. for specialists. Whereas if you're just looking to stay at the top, keep them as specialized as possible.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Actually, I wanted to add to what Joe said. You're absolutely right that people who are specialized, they want to make it complicated and keep it right there. And so it reminded me of this book I read, Get Rid of Performance Review, you know? Yes, and because it says how companies can stop intimidating, start managing, and focus on what really matters is the subtitle there. So I read the book, and one of the things is that it actually also, when you go for performance review, right, and then you have all these KPIs that are set and so on, sometimes, very often, it leaves out the person who's making the KPIs happen. So you could have someone who's supporting everyone. It's just like when you play basketball, you have the assist, and the person who assists the baskets being, the scoring is just as important as the person scoring the baskets, right? So then it likens it to that, and that person who does that is normally left out of a review like that. And then it went down the path that a lot of HR departments and so on, they have these very fancy terms and fancy training terminology or whatever in HR, is actually to keep their jobs and make them specialized there so that they don't lose their jobs and they don't become what do you call obsolete or unnecessary to the organization. So it was a very interesting read. So when you said that, it reminded me of this book. Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. It's this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things that I think is often the problem with certain types of metrics in particular, but metrics in general, financial metrics, I think, are really sometimes bad indicators of maybe where a company is headed. I think that's where it takes nuance to really understand what the company is trying to accomplish and how they're progressing. But sometimes when companies manage themselves to metrics, what you said is the subtitle is, what really matters. They stop managing to what really matters and they're managing to metrics.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things, it just actually reminded me, we need to sit down and work on the agreed outcomes that the person whom we are reviewing or is working needs to tell us what they want to accomplish. I think that might be better. And then whether this is what the company needs, and then you can tell that the person who is suggesting it, then it becomes something that is more personal to them. So I'm gonna look into this because of what you said, just reminded me that that's how I think we should be doing our reviews, with our people, like pulling them in, giving them feedback. But the point is that it's what they have to suggest, and we generally don't come from that space. It's like we tell them what we want, but we have our goals, we have our vision, and they have to help tell us what they need to do to get to that vision. Yeah, anyway, just a very good reminder just now what you said for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked with a model that said, here's the vision and mission up top if you want. On the two sides, there's core values, and on the other side, it might be sort of operational beliefs or guidelines, and at the bottom is your leadership, and then inside is the all of the organizational staffing that's required. and everybody uh, is aiming at achieving the purpose of the organization, let's say, or the mission, the vision. And in a kind of open system, they are allowed to work towards that mission in whatever works best for them, whether it's in their department or them individually, i.e. individually, if they like to dress in a suit, they can dress in a suit. If they want to dress in shorts, they can dress in shorts, kind of thing. But as long as they stay inside the core values and the operational guidelines, and they are driving towards the vision and the purpose, and the leadership is facilitating more than directing, let's say. And then if somebody steps out of the boundary and it gets picked up, then they're not sanctioned for doing that. They're simply have it pointed out to them that they're now outside the acceptable boundaries. And they are now given an opportunity to either get back inside or take their leave. And so it becomes a self sort of.
So what's in the essence? So in the system of 4, what is your 4 there?
Well, the first one is so-called top one, and the diamond concept, if you want, is the vision and mission.
Okay.
The bottom one, if you want, is leadership, leadership style. And the two flanking ones is a core values. And the other side might be something like operational guides or operational sort of, could be rules or procedures. And then inside the staff, department-wise or individual-wise, are given a lot of freedom to work towards the vision with the job assignments that they have.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I hadn't thought it from that perspective. You know, I mean, I tend not to separate leadership and staff. And I think about it in those terms. And so that's why I was having that difficulty of seeing some of that. And then I think of it a little bit differently in the sense of mission and values, and then you have core values, which I call principles. Then you have guides, which I'm not clear on that, and then you have leaders and people. But then I think of guides as I think of my 4 with that is more along the lines of capacity. And then so and I look at it, capacity as opposed to maybe a guide per se. It's interesting. No, it's an interesting model.
Well, it's also working on the principle of sort of self-direction as opposed to other direction.
Correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, self-direction would require. That's why I was combining maybe leadership and as well as the employees.
Mm-hmm.
That's more level.
Okay, we're approaching the 0 hour. I thought I would share just this for a second because it's the idea. I'm so used to seeing 2D representations of everything.
Right.
There's idea that Richard talked about, that when I change my paradigm from a 2D yin yang into a 3D yin yang, suddenly it looks different, and I'm suddenly seeing a model of something. This was from Walter Russell, and it's the idea. I've always seen the sine wave just as this 2-dimensional up and down thing, right? Well, he describes it as this spiral of energy rolling around this 2-dimensional thing. Suddenly the wave cycle becomes a 3D entity, a 3D thing. So I thought that it was just worth showing in terms of coming out of 3D. We just finished. I think it's a good time to finish. We left off at required for existence, and we're about to drop into what else is true And I had some major epiphanies just looking through the book on page 33. So we'll kind of wind it up now, if that's okay with everybody. So Joe, how are you feeling? And what are your takeaways tonight? So glad you were able to make it to the call.
Yeah, no, I was very happy I was able to make it to the call as well. I thought that this is, was a great discussion in the sense that, kind of reviewing back and just thinking about things in terms of inside and outside. That's something where I start. And so it helps with kind of capturing context, I find, and not just looking at things in a linear perspective. Well, I shouldn't say linear, but maybe that was the wrong word in that particular instance. But by looking at things inside and outside, you don't necessarily separate the person from its environment. And so then you look at the person's connections within the environment. I think once you start to do that, you start to have a greater depth of analysis, but you have fundamentally the ability to ask questions. That's the part where you can start to kind of put together a system of four. And actually, if the system is coherent, then you can actually do analysis that's meaningful. So, and I think that that's where it's not simply just looking at numbers, and it's looking at relationships, but it's also asking the right questions. If it's just counting, then that can be problematic, as I'd articulated a little bit with the analysis that's often done where I work. And I think that, kind of seeing that and being, more we talk about it, I think the more clear it becomes. I also think it's really important to also consider the types of organization, and I put something in there about this, the types of organizations that are resilient, and the types of organizations that are static. And clearly, the organization that empowers employees and doesn't necessarily relegate them to one particular function is an organization that will ultimately be more resilient. And I think this directly relates to the comment that Amy had made previously in that chapter where she had talked about, and the one I commented on earlier was where, where adults are essentially scared to step out of their comfort zone, right? So if they're scared to step out of their comfort zone, then ultimately there's a resilience issue. So that's directly related to that. So that, again, I think it's a really important part because I think that this is where empowerment is directly related to psychological safety, as well as as resilience. And Amy has written about the idea of the fearless organization as well. So all of this is interrelated. It was really really good conversation on a number of levels. I appreciate everybody's comments. So, Anne, how do you feel? What are you taking away from today?
I actually am quite excited about taking this forth with my team. Yeah. So I think you've heard me say that. So tomorrow there's a meeting, and I'm gonna go through I'm gonna put out the chapter, a couple of pages from the Irrationality the Irrationality of Pi. So I'm gonna put it out there and see what comes out. And the taking away today, love the fact that logic is dangerous. Going back to common sense, I think that's such a great reminder. Steve, thanks for that one. And then Richard, the structure, the system that you created, right? Is there a name for that one? Because the vision and mission at the top, the leadership below, and this structure, this system that you created, right? I love the idea of self-direction as opposed to other direction. And you're absolutely right. You know, we have, if people forget to work within that system and or push boundaries within that system, then they go in another direction completely, like sideways, or don't know, God knows where they go, or even another dimension or parallel something. So yeah, is there a name for that system that you created?
Well, it actually comes off of the theory of chaos theory, which has to do with self-organizing systems. So it's a self-organizing model that is bounded by those four things. And it you know, as Joel was mentioning some other names, principles, etc. It can be the guidelines, the boundaries can be whatever you want. They could be values, they could be principles, they could be, but some are sort of the higher level kind of guidelines, and the others are the more operational guidelines. And then the top is the mission and vision, and the bottom is the leadership style.
Yeah.
And then inside, you operate off of the principle of self-organization. In other words, you simply ask of everybody that we operate inside this framework, and we all drive whatever we're doing in our departments towards the mission and vision. And so it's the opposite of a well laid out 5-year strategy.
Yeah.
And it's the reverse of a step-by-step activity to get from year 1 to year 5. And it's difficult to, well, I had a very simple example at the university. We had one of our support staff who every year during Valentine's Day, she was able to slip a little Valentine card, a child's type of Valentine card, into everybody's mailbox. And it was sort of like, be my secret Valentine type of thing. And it motivated her all year to work hard and to do way more than what she might normally be expected to do, just because she enjoyed that activity. Well, if the upper echelon of the organization had known really who it was, they may well have said, you can't do that. That's childish. You know, you're in an adult organization. But I think that what she was doing was her way of working towards the mission and vision of the organization, where somebody else might, you know, be the suit and tie kind of guy. So yeah, it's the principle of self-organizing. And
Okay. Yep.
I could send you some information as to how we put it together as well.
Yeah,
Okay. Joe, you like that too, right?
I would definitely like to see that.
Yeah.
It would definitely be interesting.
Yep. And just to finish it off, so next week, Wednesday and Sunday, I won't be able to join in. Yeah, I'll be away in Sarawak, and then the week after, I'll be back to being able to join the meetings. And so, Richard, how do you feel, and what is your takeaway today?
Well, as I said, I feel pretty good in terms of what I said earlier about finishing the chapter for publication, and now I even feel more I don't know, excited is not the word, but it's really fulfilled in the sense of you saying that you're going over to Sarawak, and that's where I think I mispronounced it last week, but of saying that's where my former student who was coming your way is where she was born. And one other just quick epiphany was that in the writing of this book, I had to do some search on Herbert Spencer and the concept of social Darwinianism. And social Darwinianism was, I always understood it to mean that it was his way of trying to take Darwin's ideas of survival of the fittest and separate people into those who deserved to live and those who didn't, the undeserving and deserving. But in reading about his work in more depth, I discovered that what he was actually discovering had to do with the attitude in his day of free will. And he was trying to make the case that free will does not stand on its own, that the behavior of people and the environment are interconnected, just the way Joe was talking about it earlier. And so he was trying to make the case that the individual, if you want, in an environment have to be seen as an interacting sort of whole. And it was others who misused his concept of survival of fittest to turn it into the idea that you separate the fit from the unfit, and therefore you treat the marginalized people in a less sort of accepting or wholesome sort of way. So it really blew my mind to realize that I have misinterpreted Spencer all these years in my own work. And saw him as a negative contributor to the understanding of holism and interconnectedness. And it turns out that he was trying to make the case for that and the importance of it. So that was a big takeaway for me, and I share it with you as part of my takeaway tonight. Steve, how are you feeling? And what are you taking away from this?
Well, I'll tell you, these conversations just blow my mind. I just always get something wonderful. Besides the points I've made tonight and my gratitude for being able to share all those graphics, many of them cost me thousands of dollars. And I've never been able to show them to anybody. So, I was doing a podcast 2 or 3 years ago, and I was doing it on mindfulness, and I was showing all these relationships and stuff. And at that point, I was making some money too, and I was just putting all my money into what I could to show these things to people. I haven't shown them for years. Thanks for your patience as I go looking for them. And I'm kind of burrowing down on my book on extreme mindfulness. But here's a point from tonight that is just absolutely critical, because my book is called Extreme Mindfulness. And the subtitle is going to be something like How to Experience Enlightenment in 30-second intervals for 10 minutes periods per day. The idea is practice enlightenment for 10 minutes and do it in 30-second intervals. I've got to work on the wording for that. But one of the sections, when I start out, one of my big things I define is that meditation itself is like, the word meditation is like the word Kleenex. It doesn't mean anything. You could grab a piece of toilet paper and that could be used as a Kleenex, and so what we've got to do, first of all, is define our terms. And tonight, I'm going to use this Bucky quote: terminology that is both precise and consistent leads to better comprehension, which in turn leads to the ability to experiment knowledgeably. Experiment fosters both greater understanding and invention. Wow. In short, progress. And so the idea is, if you want to progress with your meditative practice, start being precise and consistent with your language, and work with me. Language is going to be a big part of my book, because the word meditation, it just means so many dadgum things, So I'm just really, really grateful for all that I was able to share tonight, and all that I've heard from you, Richard, from you, Ann, from you, Joe. Amazing. And per your request, and I sent you synergetics in a PDF file. It's in
Oh,
your email.
thank you. Thank
I-
you.
In one of your emails, so per your request. Boy, do I look, oh, and by the way, I put in the black hole animation in here. I put in a couple of yin yang things. I put in the meditator deal, and they are not going to be able to be, if you download the chat, I don't think they're going to be there. So I will send them off in the invitation. I'll send them out
Okay.
with the invitation. They'll be attached to the next thing. Thank you guys for all your feedback. Wow, what a meaningful conversation for your years of experience, each of you. Thank you so much. I'm complete.
I got
Thank
it.
you all.
Book. Thank you so much, Steve.
Good.
And
You're
thank you
back.
for all the diagrams and everything, your
Oh,
videos.
Yeah, the diagrams are really, I mean, I've always been incredibly impressed by those. And
Wonderful. It's so
yeah,
fun.
definitely Richard sent me that stuff you wrote about the self-organizing.
So Richard, you got a few fans here looking for your the stuff you wrote, to quote Joe. So
Definitely.
yeah, dynamite. Okay. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care.